Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Perfectly Mentored. I'm your host, Jason Portnoy. My guest today is the amazing Randi Zuckerberg. She's an entrepreneur, investor, best-selling author, award-winning producer, and founder and CEO of Zuckerberg Media. She's passionate about the intersection of tech and media, and Randi was an early employee at Facebook where she was the creator of Facebook Live, which we'll talk about. She currently hosts a weekly tech business show on SiriusXM called Randi Zuckerberg Means Business. And her TV show Dot, a winner of KidScreen's Best New Preschool Series, is currently available on Hulu, NBC, Universal Kids, and stations around the world. She's a best-selling author of Dot Complicated, Dot, and Pick 3. She's also a two-time Tony-winning producer, as if the above wasn't impressive enough. And she starred in The Rock of Ages on Broadway in 2014 and serves on the board of the American Theater Wing. Randi, my great and absolute pleasure to welcome you to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. And I know before the show we were talking, and I think for both of us, our favorite job of all of those that you listed is mom. For
yeah, we left that off the bio. A mom of 3.
I know you're a proud dad, and so it's it's probably the most challenging job right now in these times.
But it's fitting it was left off, right? Because it's a thankless job at times, right?
It is.
It's good.
It is. It's a thankless job. You're like the CEO where like people only notice you're there when things go wrong.
Exactly. And you can't go anywhere. The board can't fire you, but they may not like you from time to time.
That's right. They rarely like you, but like also your customer service, your IT support, you're the janitor, you're everything.
So true. So true. Well, look, I want to talk about your journey, right? How did you become this thriving businesswoman? I remember I've heard you speak before and you wanted to be a Broadway star. So how do you get from being a Broadway actress to being this thriving, amazing entrepreneur?
Oh my goodness. Well, first of all, that's so kind of you, especially since for me, my journey, I feel like is only a little bit complete. There's so much that I want to do. One thing I will say though, is that, my dream, as you mentioned, was to star on Broadway. And I think that being an actress, especially at a young age, like really teaches you about rejection very early in life, because when you're 7, 8 years old and you go audition, you're not going to get most of the parts that you audition for. And I think as parents, we coddle children. We keep them from hearing no and from getting rejected. But I actually think those experiences of getting rejected early on in life set me up so well for everything that I've done in business and entrepreneurship, because I got used to hearing no. I developed a thick skin. And now, like, I don't even mind hearing no. I like it because it means that I'm like closer to that yes.
So, I mean, that's such a fascinating outlook. I haven't even thought of it like that. But I mean, was all that no? Did you give up on acting? Like, what was it? Like, what made you sit there and say, all right, I'm going to now go into business versus, when do you know when to put your dream on hold, I guess?
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I always loved theater, but I took a psychology course in college, and I remember reading this study about how some parents, in order to get their children to practice the piano, would give their kids allowance, like linked to practicing the piano. And that would always backfire because it would mean that the kids would just hate it because they'd start to associate playing the piano with making money. And then if there wasn't a reward attached to it, they would derive no value. And so I actually kind of decided very early in life, I was like, you know what? I love theater and music and singing so much that I think I always want to love it. I always want to have it in my life as a passion and as an interest that I'm doing. But I think if I link it to my career too much, I'm going to come out the other side hating it and regretting it. So that's why I ended up studying marketing and business psychology in college. I went to work at a big ad agency in New York City. And it was somewhere a few years into that I got a call from my brother saying, hey, Randi, I could really use some advice on this whole marketing thing. I've started this small little startup called thefacebook.com. And could you come out for a weekend and give me some marketing advice? And well, the rest is history from there. I went out for a weekend and I ended up staying for 10 years.
You said something fascinating, something that I love that we don't talk a lot about is you're a marketer, right? So you had a degree in psychology, right? You studied psychology and then you went to work in an ad agency. How important was your background in psychology when it comes to marketing? And what were some of the lessons you've learned from psychology that you've adopted towards marketing?
I mean, I think it was hugely important to study psychology to understand why people do the things they do, what they're driven by, what their motivation is, even like things like the ideal group size to get something done. Those are all the kinds of things that I learned in psychology that I've applied with me, both in marketing, and now I do a lot of investing in startups. And almost anything can be traced back to human psychology of like why a group of co-founders work well together, or what you can do to motivate a team during a pandemic or a crisis. So I think having that basic understanding of what drives people just really helps you get to the root of marketing any business, or even building a business that's giving value back. So I would hugely recommend to anyone to take or audit some kind of a beginning psych class if you want to be a great marketer.
And when you worked at the ad agency, right? So you had a good job. You left to go follow your brother, or to help out your brother. What advice do you have for the entrepreneurs listening who, may have good jobs right now? How'd you weigh that risk reward analysis? How'd you know whether it was a good move to jump off? Like, how can we as entrepreneurs understand when to take that jump, when to leave that cushiony job?
Yeah, that was a hard one. And I actually had a lot of people in my life tell me that I was making a terrible mistake, that I was throwing my career away. I had a great life in New York. But I think if you speak to people at the end of their life, and there's been a lot of studies that have been shown, speaking to people in hospice care at the end of their life, what they regret most about their life, they regret the swings they didn't take. They regret the chances they didn't take. No one says, oh, I wish I stayed in that cushy job longer. No one regrets that. They regret oh, I had the chance to join a startup and I didn't. I had the chance to move across the country and experience something new. And, I actually thought that there was a big chance that Facebook would fail. It was very early stage. Most early stage startups fail. And I still thought, what, this is going to be such an exciting opportunity to do something completely different than anything I would have the chance to do. I'm going to learn new skills. I'm going to get a little uncomfortable and see what I'm made of. I'm going to, experience a new state and a new place. And even if the business itself failed, all of those things would still make it a win. And so that's why I'm such a big proponent of people just taking those big chances. I think especially, if you don't have children, if you don't have tons of the huge expenses that are on your personal life balance sheet, why not? Why not go for it and take the big risk?
What were those early days at Facebook like? I mean, we all see Facebook now, but what were the early days like? And how did it differ from big companies like an ad agency?
It was so fun. When I joined, I would say around 12, 15 people. And it's fun because you really get to have your hand in everything. And even if you don't have your hand in everything, you see what's going on, everyone at the company. It feels like you're just you're really part of every decision.
How many people were there when you first went?
Yeah, I would say about 15 people. Of course, as a company grows, everyone has to specialize, a little more. You get to a point where you don't know everyone in the company anymore. And so you go through these different phases, and every one of these phases has things that are wonderful and things that are challenging, and that in the early stages of a startup, basically that startup is your life. I mean, I was working 100 hours a week. It was my professional life, my social life, my, every part of my life was being spent at Facebook, which I loved. It was perfect for the stage of my life that I was in. I'm not sure with 3 young children now that I could go back and, be in the early stages of a startup like that, which is why I now invest in and advise other founders, using my experience, but, they could be the ones in the weeds. But, it was truly an incredible experience. I really hope that everyone who's listening to this has the experience to join some sort of a project at that very early stage and watch it grow and feel like you were there from the beginning, because to know that something is now in the world because you put your time and your name on it is a feeling that's just very, very special.
So, I mean, one of the things that one of the biggest accomplishments that came out of your time there is Facebook Live, right? I'm just curious, if I would be a fly on the wall in that conversation of how that happened, can you give the listeners a little bit of background? Like, how'd you come up with the idea? How was that pitched? How was it accepted?
Absolutely. And I have to say, it was a long journey. So we used to do these hackathons every few months where everyone would just, invite to stay up all night and work on some kind of a project. I never really thought I had anything to contribute to those hackathons because I wasn't a technical coder or programmer. So I'd come and I'd, work on silly projects. Like once I helped build a mini golf course on the roof. Like I helped start an 80s rock band inside the company at another hackathon. But something really clicked for me when the iPhone came out in 2008, because I suddenly realized that every single one of us was walking around as a media company, and that every single one of us was now our own television network, our own, radio host all the time. So at one of the hackathons, I decided, okay, what if I could kind of make my own TV show right here from the Facebook hackathon that I could broadcast out to the world? So I started just interviewing different engineers on what they were doing, showing the hackathon. Not that many people watched, like mostly my parents, let's be real. It wasn't like that captivating footage. But a few weeks later, I actually got a call out of the blue from Katy Perry's management team saying, we saw this new Facebook TV show that you're working on, and we would love to get Katy Perry on it to announce her world tour. And that was just like a wild moment for me, because this little hackathon project that I had just dreamt up because I was inspired by the iPhone and mobile connectivity and what you could do with that on Facebook. Suddenly, I had demand from Katy Perry to use it. 4 months later, President Obama was using Facebook Live on a weekly basis. And so it was this like from 4 months from a broom closet at a hackathon to the president of the United States using this product. And it was wild because, like I said, I did not think of myself as an inventor. When I went out to Silicon Valley, I thought of myself as a marketer behind the scenes who was helping other people's great ideas. But it really taught me that every single one of us is sitting on massive ideas like that if you just give yourself the permission to dream big and not be afraid to fail.
I feel like you're the perfect person to ask this question to then. For the listeners who want advice on how to do well on a Facebook Live, I mean, who better to ask than the person who created Facebook Live? So what would be your tips?
Sure. Well, gosh, it's funny because the product has really evolved so much from that launch. I mean, I would say also it's a great reminder that anything that looks like an overnight success has been years and years in the making. That first Facebook Live that we did with Katy Perry was in January of 2011. Wow. And it wasn't until several years later that Facebook Live became a feature that was available to everyone on their profiles around the world. Today, Facebook Live is used by something like 2 billion people around the world, which is really remarkable. But, this is almost a decade after the product launching. So just, I like to keep that in my mind every time I think like, wow, that person had overnight success. There's probably a decade of work and preparation that went into it. I think there's so many ways to have a great Facebook Live, but I think that just the thing that I've learned the most is to just be yourself. It was the celebrities that came on Facebook Live in the early days and tried to like be so polished and so glamorous, and it never worked. People, that's not the reason someone tunes into a live broadcast is, they can go on Netflix, go on Disney Plus if you want something super polished. You go on Facebook Live to have an authentic connection that you wouldn't get anywhere else. And so, don't feel like it has to be perfect. Just be yourself. And that has always been the most successful tactic.
I couldn't agree more. I love the fact that when I see people I follow, people I look up to, and I see them in their raw moments without the polish, without all that, that's what creates that connection with them.
Totally.
technology, right? Like there are two camps here, right? You have the people who sit there and say, technology is destroying us. It's our demise. It's evil. It's the worst thing. Then you have the other people who sit there and say, no, technology is actually making the world a better place. What are your thoughts?
You know, it's funny because if you had asked me 6 months ago, even like as a parent, my ideas for technology and screen time for my own kids, I probably would have skewed much more answering that question in like, oh, I don't want to expose them to that much tech yet. You're like, they're kids. Tech maybe isn't the best for young children. Now, cut ahead to the middle of a pandemic when there's no school and nothing. And I'm like, so, how about if like the computer is your babysitter for half the day now? So I want to caveat this answer by the fact that every family is different, every situation is different. And sometimes, the global situation that you find yourself in means that you need to constantly be reevaluating your own relationship with technology. But I definitely think we're in an interesting world that we have to keep reminding ourselves that technology is not good or bad. Like we are good and bad in how we use it. I am grateful every second of the day for things like Zoom, video conferencing, for my phone, for the fact that we can be so connected to our colleagues, even working from home. On the other hand, the fact that we have all these devices and connectivity means that those same features come in between me and my loved ones so much. Like I find myself reaching for my phone when I should be in the moment with other things. And so, that's my own behavior that I have to address. Those are my own boundaries that I have to create. But I definitely think that it makes for this just constant push and pull with our own relationships with technology. And it can be very challenging, especially raising children in this world.
How do you stop yourself from reaching for that phone? Like, is it like you're doing it and then all of a sudden you're now triggered, or is it something that you still work on every single day?
I still work on it every day. I mean, my first book, Complicated, is all about kind of unplugging and creating those boundaries. And even after writing that book, studying it, researching it for years, I still struggle, honestly, with my own behaviors. And I think it's because we live in a world where you're so expected to be reachable all the time, especially if you work in client service like you do. If you're in a marketing agency, I mean, like it's the matter of having business or losing business if you're not reachable. So if you're in that kind of business, how do you still draw those personal boundaries? It gets very, very tricky. I read that the average American is working 3 hours more every day during this pandemic because we're all working from home. So you're just kind of expected to be reachable all the time. And that's not fair. It's not fair for any of us to have that added stress.
I'm wondering if that's just a pandemic thing, because I think when you're a client paying fees, right, you should assume that that person's there to answer your call no matter when you're calling them. And there should be no reason, right? You have your phone on you, you have email, you should be checking it. It's a hard thing to do to set boundaries with clients. What advice do you have for the listeners in order to set boundaries?
Gosh, I've struggled with that for so long. So first of all, there are a few things that I even try to do with my own team. I am constantly sending reminders out to my team that, we are all on different time schedules right now. Some of us are on the East Coast, some are on the West Coast. So just because you get an email from someone right away doesn't mean you have to answer it right away. It just might be that that's the time of day that the other person is doing their best work. Like I send a lot of emails late at night. I do not expect anyone to respond to me in the middle of the night. That's when I finally get the kids down to bed and I get some breathing time to have, really thoughtful time to think about the issue.
But the person who does respond to you late at night, is that like kind of like, do you kind of like skew more towards them, be like, I like that they answered me. I like that they answered me right away.
I mean, usually I call them out on it. Usually I'm like, what are you doing up at this time? You better have like a good reason.
You're Randy. You're my boss. You're messaging me at 12 a.m. I'm responding.
No, I mean, and listen, there are definitely times that I set an expectation that I do want someone to be reachable. If for example, I'm traveling and giving a keynote across the world, I would expect that my assistant sets their schedule to be on that same time zone in order to support me. But I try to be very, very just explicit with my team that just because I send emails late at night does not mean that I expect them to respond to it. And I think, if I set the example of drawing boundaries that way, that maybe it gives other people on the team permission to set their own boundaries with technology. I also try very hard to observe what I call like a digital shabbat. We try to take at least like a chunk of a few hours on the weekends that all phones get left at home and we go for a bike ride or we go out or we do something. And so, it's hard at first.
It feels like you're walking around naked to me.
Yeah. It'll show you how addicted you are to your phone if you even try to like go somewhere for 20 minutes without it. But then you build up gradually and it's quite freeing of like what it feels like to actually be in the moment again.
Let's talk entrepreneurship for a second. This is why all of a sudden is now that's the cool thing to be, right? It's cool to be an entrepreneur. We glorify it. It has the easiest path of entry. I mean, anyone can become an entrepreneur, yet it's the hardest position to succeed at.
I mean, it's interesting because I think that, honestly, this country is built on the backs of small business owners and entrepreneurs. But I think we've lost touch a little bit with what the definition of an entrepreneur is. I think now we think an entrepreneur is like a tech person who's like goes on to be worth billions and billions of dollars. And like, that's the only definition of an entrepreneur. But I think we need to back up a little bit and realize that probably all of us are engaging in very entrepreneurial behaviors, that like just because you're not like Elon Musk doesn't make what you're doing any less. For example, like if you look on Etsy right now, there are over 100,000 sellers who are selling homemade face masks. Like that's not even an industry that existed really like 6 months ago. And now there's 100,000 people who have set up businesses. I mean, those are savvy entrepreneurs who have pivoted their time to meet a need. I do a lot of producing and investing in live theater of Broadway. Someone who creates a Broadway show is an entrepreneur. I mean, creatives are entrepreneurs. If you are designing and putting work and creating something that didn't exist until you put it into the world, you're an entrepreneur. And so I really want us to just expand and broaden our definition of who an entrepreneur is, because they come in all ages, all genders, all ethnicities and walks of life. And it's not just like the tech billionaires that have earned the status of entrepreneur.
A lot of talking heads in this space, in this entrepreneurial space, talk about hustle. You kind of come from the opposite side and talk about work-life balance. You actually had a tweet that went viral, and which led to your book, Pick 3. Can you talk a little bit about the notion of what a well-balanced life looks like, and is it even achievable?
Yeah, so I actually don't believe in work-life balance. I believe in being well lopsided more than being well balanced. And I believe in the hustle also. Like I think you would be hard pressed to find someone who like works harder than I do. I know you work very hard also, so maybe you and I tie on that one. But so I believe in the hustle. I just believe in doing it in a very strategic and thoughtful way where you kind of ruthlessly prioritize things. I spent a lot of time just feeling guilty all the time, feeling like there were so many things I had to do, and I would go to bed focused on what I didn't do. And I came up with this philosophy called Pick 3, which is, that's the viral tweet that you were referring to. And it goes like this: work, sleep, family, friends, fitness, pick 3. And you can pick a different 3 every single day of your life. You're not locked in to the 3 that you're doing, but I truly believe that you can really only be excellent at 3 things at a time. And I don't know about you, but I'd rather be great at a few things than try to do a million things and fall short at all of them. I think, I want to play a little game with you for a second, Jason. If like, sure. Can you name for me like the maybe top like 2 or 3 things you are most proud of in your life. And if you were well balanced at any of them, because my prediction is that you will not have been.
I would say right off the bat, listening to as you're asking that question, thinking there is zero chance I'm well balanced in any of them. And I would think that I'm great at it. And now listening to you and listening to the question back, it's like, yeah, I understand.
But like when you ask people to like think of the things they're most proud of in their lives, people, they often think of either like having children, like running a marathon, doing like something great at work, you know, maybe a great like physical personal achievement or something. And those are all moments where you allow yourself to kind of just be lopsided in
You're
one
all
area
in. You're
of your
all
life.
in those moments.
You're all in. And being all in, it doesn't have to be at a startup. It doesn't have to be professionally. Like you could be all in at doing the Whole30 in January, or you could be all in like on your children and homeschooling them because schools are closed. But like you're just, the only way that you're going to be excellent is if you give yourself the permission to go all in and to kind of pick 3 things. That means that there's going to have to be a few things in your life that you don't do right now, and you're going to have to get over that guilt, and you're going to have to be okay with saying, you know what, there will be a time and a place to prioritize those things again. It's just not right now.
So how do you look at it? Do you wake up in the morning and sit there and say, today I'm going to focus on these 3 things. This is where I'm going to be lopsided in. This is where I'm going all in today.
Totally. In fact, I just in like the notes section on my iPhone, I actually like give myself a little scorecard each night. It takes like 20 seconds to do in just like the notes section. And I just kind of write like what I accomplished in different areas. And I kind of like score myself a little bit on how well I prioritized and if that achieved excellence. And like sleep is one of those categories, which sounds ridiculous. Like I almost didn't put it as a category when I wrote pick 3 because I thought, well, we have to do it anyway. So why write it? And then I realized that like, if you don't mindfully think about getting a good night's sleep, you don't do it. Like we're terrible procrastinators. And so like, that's awesome. I mean, when you have a night where you get sleep and then you can cross it off as something you prioritize well, like that's a double win for your day. So unfortunately, with 3 young kids, I'm not picking sleep very much these days, but I look forward to, you know, maybe 10 years in the future being able to pick it again.
Do you have a routine? Are you a routine person? Are you, you know, a lot of people I've interviewed, they write their goals down in the morning and then at night. And what's your routine like if you have one?
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting because this is actually the first time in my life during this pandemic that I've become a routine person. Previously, I sort of had like 2 separate lives. I had on the road Randy and I had at home Randy, because for the last decade, I have spent about 100 days a year on the road, either speaking at conferences, advising, and visiting companies that I'm investing in. And so I kind of have this like on the road persona and what my life looks like. And then when I'm at home, I try to be like super family mom, Randy, and I have a different persona there. So this has actually been a really interesting new experience for me, having, you know, waking up in a world where every day is the same and there's a routine and there's something nice about it, but there's also, you know, you have to, I think, remind yourself to have gratitude for things when you fall into a routine and, you know, find little ways of keeping things fresh and exciting. But it's, I'm a very early riser, no matter what, like no matter where in the world I am, I'm usually up by like 5:30 in the morning. In fact, I set an alarm for 5:30 every morning, and I can't even remember the last time that I had to wake up to the alarm. Like I always beat it awake. And I think like a lot of entrepreneurs and people that you meet like tend to be morning people because you get so much done before the rest of the world like has even gotten out of their pajamas.
It may be like an off question to ask now because no one's traveling anywhere anytime soon right now, but how do you balance being a parent and being on the road so much? Like, how do you do you have a conversation with your kids? Like as a parent, I travel a lot or did travel a lot. I'm just curious how you, it's hard for me. I know it's probably hard for them too. How do you handle that?
Yeah, you know what? It's interesting because I've sort of always traveled. So that's always been the normal that's existed in our household. That's what our kids knew. I think it's going to actually be a lot more challenging now that I've been home for, 6 months or a year, however long it will be. It'll be a lot harder to go back out on the road and have that. Honestly, it's that pick three mentality that I told you that saves me, because when I'm on the road, I just keep reminding myself, you know what? I'm not picking my family right now, which is sad. I miss them, but I am going all in on work right now and doing what I need to do, because I'm doing it out of love for supporting my family and out of love for the entrepreneurs that I'm meeting and everything that I'm doing. And I know that it's all going to balance out in the long run, because on the days that I'm not traveling, I'm going to be all in on my family. And I think we tend to think about work-life balance in like a 24-hour period and scoring ourselves on, did I get everything done in this one day? Whereas I think we really need to step back and think about it as a long-term thing. It doesn't really matter if you're on the road this day or that day, as long as when you step back and you look at a year or 5 years, were you balanced within that time frame of your life? And I think that matters a lot more.
You consult a lot of entrepreneurs, right? You and a lot of businesses. How important from a marketing perspective is getting your name out there, is awareness, is brand building when it comes to building a successful business?
I think it's the most important thing. And that's why, first of all, I think it's so awesome that you have this podcast and everything that you're doing. You're so gifted at this. But I really think that storytelling is really the most important tool in business today. And especially as a founder, being able to tell your own story in a compelling way and getting your personal brand out there. So I think the most important thing that anyone can do is to invest in building your own brand, which means understanding the mediums that you shine. Are you a great writer? Are you great at audio? Are you great at video? And just really doubling down on making a voice for yourself there. And I know that's something that you speak with your clients about all the time.
Over the past few years, you've been developing Sue's Tech Kitchen, sorry. What it does is exposes students to STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, if I got that right, and gives them the opportunity to really learn about tech while baking and doing hands-on activities. What was the reason behind all this? What's the passion behind this project and for you to jump into this space?
I'm so glad you asked. And I just came off of a meeting right before this about how we're pivoting Sue's Tech Kitchen to be an online experience now. One of the things that really bummed me out about Silicon Valley, and gosh, I had amazing experiences in Silicon Valley, but nothing is without its challenges. And one of the things that really bummed me out was the growing digital divide in this country. The fact that if you are lucky enough to be born in the right zip code with the right access to technology and education, you are made. You have every opportunity under the sun. And if you are unlucky enough to be born in a zip code that doesn't have reliable Wi-Fi, that doesn't teach you technology, how can you ever catch up? And so my team and I, we launched this initiative called Sue's Tech Kitchen, where we decided we wanted to go to some of the parts of the country that are weakest in STEM education and Wi-Fi access, and try to see if we could create a delightful aha moment for children and families in those areas where they might look at tech and STEM in a positive light, so that later down the road, instead of thinking it's overwhelming and they'll never catch up, they might think it's something to aspire to. So we created this dessert sweet shop that's fully powered by robots and 3D printers. You can get a 3D printed chocolate s'more. You can have a robot make pancakes for you. Like it was just such a fun kind of aha moment. And we toured it around about a dozen different cities in America, everywhere from kind of Jackson, Mississippi, to Chattanooga, Tennessee, to Tacoma, Washington, and all of these places, and had relationships with the Chamber of Commerce in those areas. And it's truly so magical and exciting to see what happens when you expose children and families who never thought they would have that access to a 3D printer or AI. Now, of course, we're doing everything online. And we actually were running these kind of week-long programs throughout the entire school year now that combine kind of that fun and aha magic of STEM for kids. So definitely encourage everyone to check out SuzTechKitchen.com. And we right now we're launching a fun curriculum around magic and illusions.
I'll make sure to put the link in the show notes.
Thank you.
I think this is a perfect place to wrap up with this question, because you spoke about a divide, but I see another divide. And I want to kind of end, this podcast with asking you a question about females and the entrepreneurial space.
Yes.
What's your advice to the amazing, talented women out there who feel this space is a man's world? And in fact, if you're okay with giving this answer, I'm a dad to a new beautiful girl. What advice do you have on raising a strong, empowered woman today?
Oh my gosh, it's such a beautiful question. Thank you. I guess to first answer the question to dads and to parents out there, I think, in order to really empower girls, you have to kind of introduce them to all the possibilities that they could have. So for example, I had a lot of people in my childhood tell me that I could have any job I wanted. And I'm sure they thought that was very empowering, like there's no glass ceiling, you can have any job you want. But I realized only a few years ago that not one person in my life ever told me I could create any job I wanted. It was just that I could have any job I wanted working for someone else. And so no one had even put the thought in my brain that I could create or that I could be the person that other people would want to have a job with. And so I think even just like making sure that we put those possibilities in young girls' heads is so important. The honest answer is that the jobs our children will have don't even exist today. So it's, the only thing that we could do is put wonder and curiosity and possibility in their heads, because there's no way we could steer them towards a career that we don't even know exists. I think for women out there, there are a lot of challenges. There are also so many opportunities. And for me, I'm an opportunity person. I try to focus on where the glass is half full. And so yes, in traditional areas of technology, it's an uphill climb. It's only about 6% of venture capital funding that goes to women. I fear that even after this pandemic, it's going to be even worse, because when schools aren't open, women bear most of the brunt in households of who stays home and picks up those tasks. But on the other hand, we're at the cutting edge of so many new kinds of industries. And in these new industries, everyone is getting in on the ground floor. There aren't decades and decades of legacy. And so, instead of like beating your head against the wall on more traditional areas where there is a gender divide, why not think about new emerging areas like blockchain or cannabis or the VR AR space, and spaces where you can still get in on the ground floor and there isn't kind of that separation yet. So I always try to tell women to kind of look for the new opportunity so that you don't have to play catch up. You just get in right on the ground floor with everyone else.
But even in this world, like we see on social media, it's a lot of men coming forward and a lot of men are speaking out, and they're the ones putting themselves out there. What advice do you have then for the women to not be so afraid? I know the women I've had on the show have all said it's harder for women to come to put themselves out there as like men do. But what advice do you have for them to kind of get over that? Because we need more coming forward. We need more talking out more.
You're right. Women, they don't feel as comfortable being loud or being perceived as being self-promotional or things like that. Things that like men are just like, oh, I'm just, discussing my thoughts on something. Women might say like, oh, I don't want to be seen as aggressive or like overly opinionated on things. So this is where I think it becomes really important to have a community around you who can brag for you and support you. Because for me, I don't like to brag about myself, but I love to brag about the amazing women that are in my circle of friends. Like, on any given week, if you look at my Instagram stories, you'll probably see at least 30 stories where I'm bragging about what other women are doing in business. And so if you build a community like that, you don't even have to brag about yourself. You have a built-in group of people who can do it for you. And so for anyone out there who's maybe a little bit uncomfortable getting self-promotional, it's great to have a circle of people like that who are all sharing on social media. But at the same time, you should be working on getting more comfortable with self-promotion. You should be working on, striking that fine line between, talking about what you're doing, and feeling like it's okay to share your opinion. So I think, maybe that means taking an improv class where you get familiar with being uncomfortable, but maybe it means taking on some public speaking that gets you out of your shell a little bit more like that. But I mean, these are the new rules of engagement for this world. And so you got to get comfortable playing.
Well, like you do for your friends and you brag about them, we're now friends because you've been on this podcast. We're going to use this podcast to brag about you and all the amazing stuff that you do. Randi, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. And just best of luck to you and your beautiful family to stay healthy and safe. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. Right back at you.